I'm so glad you're here. Stay with me until the end and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. They called me paranoid for checking the bank. Then I froze their cards mid-flight. My son laughed when I asked about the charge from the hotel in Maui. Said I must have clicked something wrong again. Said it with that tone, the kind that turns your questions into jokes and your instincts into jokes, and your very presence into a kind of nuisance. But when I clicked in deeper and saw the travel insurance, the champagne service, the notes left on the account from his wife, I stopped listening to their laughter. I started listening to my own silence. And that silence told me to wait, too. Watch. And then when the time was right to act, I wasn't always this quiet. I used to be the one humming while packing school lunches, pressing notes into coat pockets before field trips, scraping together enough for ballet shoes or clarinet reeds. There was a rhythm to my giving, predictable, unthanked, but never resented. When he was little, he would sit at the kitchen table swinging his feet. And I'd cut the crusts off his sandwiches while he told me about monsters in the carpet or his dream of building a rocket. And when he'd fall asleep on my chest after crying about something small and enormous, like a broken Lego spaceship, I'd hold him long past the moment he stopped needing it. His wife came into our lives with the wind of something new, bright. Lipstick, hard eyes, clever ways of calling me slow without saying the word. She liked polished things. I wasn't polished. I had calluses on my thumbs from stirring sauce with wooden spoons and old knees that creaked before I stood. She began managing their money, then slowly started managing mine. Just to help, she said. Just to simplify. At first it was subtle. She changed the online login to something she could remember. The mail started going to their address instead of mine. Easier that way, she'd said, since they were helping with my taxes. I started hearing things secondhand. Appointments made, canceled, dinners planned, uninvited. My name would be in the past tense when they spoke. Mom was always so helpful. Mom used to do that. The isolation came in like fog, not sudden, just thick. My friends called less. Or maybe I answered less. I can't remember now. He said I was resting more, which was good. He said I didn't need to worry about things anymore. Case said it with kindness on the surface. But underneath, it felt like a hand pressing gently over my mouth. One afternoon, I stood at the kitchen window, drying a plate I hadn't eaten from, and watched a robin trying to feed a full-grown chick. It kept dropping worms into the mouth of a bird that could fly. And it hit me. I'd become that robin, still feeding what should have flown. Still needed, but only in the way a bank account is needed, not a mother. Not really. I started checking things. Quietly, my old paper files, my will, the accounts I still had access to. And that's when I noticed the travel charge, not just one, but several. Resort names I hadn't been to. Car rentals I'd never driven. All under the shared family credit line I'd let them manage. And then I saw her name. Not just as an authorized user, but as the primary. Somehow I'd been moved to secondary. How do you move someone out of their own account without telling them? I waited, watched, saved screenshots. Talked to a woman at the library who still remembered me from when I used to volunteer in the children's section. She helped me get a free legal consult with a lawyer downtown. He didn't talk to me like I was confused. He listened like I'd already won. When I finally asked my son about it softly, hey, over the phone, not wanting to believe what I already knew, he told me I must be mistaken. He said they were handling things for me now. It was all part of the plan. I asked, what plan? He said I didn't need to worry about that anymore. That night, sat at the kitchen table and looked at the red teapot with the chipped lid. The one he'd made me in 3rd grade. I remembered how proud he'd been, how he'd wrapped it in newspaper and held it behind his back until I guessed. I kept it all these years. But now I saw the chip more than the shape. I called the bank the next morning, froze the cards. All of them, asked for a new account. Changed my will that week. Quietly, completely. I didn't even tell them. I waited. until I knew they were gone, until their plane was over the ocean. Using my name to toast champagne, and then I shut every door they left open. When the call came from the hotel manager, asking why the card was declined, I said I wasn't sure. I said they should speak to the account holder. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. The freedom was slow at first, like learning how to walk again. I made tea. I watched the light on the porch change with the hours. I signed documents that protected the last of what I had. I bought myself a used car, navy blue with a dent in the door. It was mine. All mine. A few weeks later, I drove to the coast alone, parked on a bluff, and watched the water stretch far and quiet. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was just awake. For the first time in years, they still call sometimes, or try to. I don't answer every time. I let the phone ring while I sweep the porch, or while I cook something just for me, or while I watch the gulls circle and laugh into the wind. It didn't start with the money. It never does. It started with a feeling, that cold hush after a phone call, the kind where you're not sure if you've forgotten something or if they've already decided you don't need to know. When you're halfway through explaining yourself and realize no one asked, when your voice sounds too loud in a room that used to echo with laughter. I think the first sign came the summer after I turned 65. They threw me a birthday dinner at the restaurant with the tall white candles and the linen napkins I always felt nervous using. My daughter-in-law picked the place. She said it was elegant. I thought it was loud. Couldn't hear the server when she spoke. I had to ask twice what the soup of the day was, and she glanced at my son when I did, as if to say, "See? Tea?" She made a toast, told everyone I was still sharp for my age, still independent, still with it. I smiled, nodded, held my wine glass steady, but it was that word, still. It stuck to me like a burr on an old sweater. Still, as if I were already fading, as if every good thing about me had become a surprise. After dessert, she helped me into my coat, like I was a guest. That quiet, practiced kindness that feels more like performance than care. I told her I'd had a lovely evening. She said she was glad I came. Not we're glad you came. She was singular. Like I wasn't family anymore. It's just a figure they ushered in for photographs. Back home, the house felt hollow, like it had been aired out and emptied. I took off my earrings and set them beside the lamp. I remember brushing my hair out, standing in front of the mirror and thinking how gray it had become. I used to dye it. Now I didn't see the point. There was a time when they looked at me like I was the center. Now I was something they navigated around. My son used to call me every Sunday. Not because I asked, he just did. Sometimes he'd tell me about work, sometimes about a movie he saw. I didn't always understand what he meant, but I liked the sound of his voice, hearing it move across the room like it used to when he was little, chasing something. The calls changed after he got married, shorter, more formal. Sometimes she would answer instead, say they were just stepping out, say they'd call later. Later didn't come. I started writing things down. Not out of paranoia, but because I noticed I was forgetting things, not big things. It's just where I'd left my slippers or whether I'd taken my vitamin. I bought a small notebook, kept it on the counter near the phone. Each page had dates, little reminders, notes about what bills were paid, who stopped by. They found it once. I picked it up while I was making tea, flipped through it with a half smile. Asked if I was writing a memoir. I said it helped me stay organized. She laughed a little and said, "Good idea. When things get messy upstairs, it's good to have a system down here." It wasn't what she said. It was how her fingers tapped the cover after like she'd finished reading a child's homework. I used to think I was imagining it, that I was being too sensitive. That maybe this is how families shift. Sons grow up, houses grow quiet, mothers turn into background music. But even background music gets turned down. Muted. The mail stopped coming directly to me around then. They said they were helping me manage things. My daughter-in-law liked to use words like streamline and consolidate. I liked stamps and handwritten notes. She liked paperless bills and passwords only she remembered. One afternoon, I asked if I could get the old electric bill back in my name. She blinked and said, "Oh, it's just easier this way." Easier for whom? I wondered. The mailbox used to be something I looked forward to: little catalogs, birthday cards from old friends, a letter from the bank I could hold in my hands. Now it held mostly silence, and the rare envelope that did arrive had a return address I didn't recognize and a name I barely read before it was discarded. Even the house began to feel like it wasn't mine anymore. Not because it had changed, but because they had. I started showing up with suggestions. New curtains might brighten the space. Maybe I should get rid of that old armchair. Wasn't it bad for my back? My back was fine. What wasn't fine was watching them look around the room as if assessing it for resale. What wasn't fine was their sudden interest in how comfortable I was, how safe, how well organized. My back was fine. What wasn't fine was watching them look around the room as if assessing it for resale. What wasn't fine was their sudden interest in how comfortable I was, how safe, how well organized everything could be. One evening, my son offered to bring over a financial advisor. Said it would be smart to get everything in order. I asked him what needed ordering. He smiled and said, "Just in case, Mom." That night, I stared at the ceiling while the fan spun circles above me. Just in case. 3 words that had never meant comfort. They meant preparation for absence. I told him I'd think about it. And then I didn't sleep for 3 nights. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive in a storm. Sometimes it's a slow drip, a quiet rearranging. It's a soft, constant erosion of your place in the story. I stopped offering tea when they came by. They never finished it. I started sitting a little farther from the table. I didn't seem to notice, or maybe they did and preferred it that way. Still, I stayed polite. Still, I smiled. Still, I nodded when they talked about things I no longer understood. Market conditions, durable power of attorney, early access to annuities. But I wrote everything down. Every word, every number. Every odd glance exchanged when they didn't think I was looking. That notebook, the same one she laughed at, it started filling up faster, and in between the lines, and began to write something else, though I didn't yet know what it was. A shape was forming, not of revenge, not even of anger, of knowing. And knowing, I've learned, is the quietest kind of power there is. The next sign was smaller than the rest. So small, I almost ignored it. But that's the way it is, isn't it? The small things tugged the hardest. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because the sun had already dipped behind the back fence. And the kitchen had that dusky, in-between light that turns everything to silver. I was folding towels at the table. I do that sometimes when I don't want to sit still. I like the feel of warm cotton, the rhythm of it. There's something that settles in me when my hands are moving. The phone rang once, then stopped. A moment later, it buzzed again. I walked over, slow, and saw my son's number. But before I could answer, it stopped again. I waited. Nothing. So I sat back down. 10 minutes later, my neighbor Louise called. She said she'd just spoken to my daughter-in-law. They'd bumped into each other at the post office. Louise had mentioned seeing me gardening the other day. Said I looked well. And my daughter-in-law, always quick with her tongue, apparently gave a soft smile and said I wasn't really doing much lately, that I mostly rested now, that I was taking it easy, that they were making sure I didn't overextend myself. It was meant to sound kind. It always is. But there's a way people say taking it easy when what they really mean is slowing down or slipping. Or not all there anymore. I kept folding the towel in my lap, but my hands were shaking. I'm not a weak woman. I've made stew in the middle of storms and balanced checkbooks with $3 to my name. I've driven through the night to be at hospital bedsides and held the door open for people who never once said thank you. But that hearing someone speak of me like I was halfway to gone, that broke something different. They were softening the idea of me. It's watering me down before pouring me out. And I knew then what I hadn't wanted to admit they were rewriting. Me, slowly, carefully, with pretty phrases that sounded like concern. That weekend, I tried to call my son. He picked up on the fourth ring, distracted, like he was waiting for someone else to call. I asked if we could meet for lunch, just the two of us. He hesitated, said he'd have to check with her. I almost asked why. I said that was fine. We didn't meet for lunch instead. I spent Sunday morning cleaning out the drawer under the stairs. It's the one with old receipts, mismatched batteries, expired coupons from grocery stores that no longer existed. Among the clutter, I found an envelope from 4 years ago, a birthday card from my granddaughter. The handwriting was messy, bubbly, still forming. She'd drawn a picture of a cake with too many candles and written, "I love you so, so, so much" under it. I sat on the floor and held that card for a long time. I haven't seen her in nearly a year. They say she's busy, that school takes up her time, that she'll come visit soon. I send gifts, cards. I bake her favorite cookies and leave them at their door. Never hear back. Sometimes I wonder if she ever gets them, or if they quietly toss them aside, saving her from the burden of remembering someone who no longer fits their picture. I try not to let the silence get to me, but it does. It always does. The house feels different now. Lighter, maybe, or emptier. I'm not sure which. The rooms echo more than they used to. I find myself talking aloud just to make the space feel full. I talk to the plants, to the kettle, to the photograph of my mother near the bookshelf. I tell her I'm okay, though I don't know if she'd believe me. Sometimes I light a candle at night. Not for prayer, just for presence. The flicker reminds me that I'm still here, still warm, still breathing in and out, even if no one notices. I started sleeping with the bedroom window cracked open. Just a little. Just enough to hear the wind move through the trees. There's something in that sound that grounds me. Makes me feel part of the world again. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got up and walked through the house, barefoot. The floors were cool against my skin. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, opened my notebook. I flipped back through the pages, all the notes, all the half-truths I'd recorded, the canceled appointments, the accounts I no longer had access to, the words they used, the way she said your money when she meant theirs. And I saw it all differently this time. Not as scattered pieces, but as a pattern. Not paranoia, but evidence. That was the night I began writing questions. Why did the insurance company send my renewal to their address? Why was my prescription suddenly under autorefill with them as the pickup contact? Why did my online bank statement require a verification code I never received? Why was I paying for a streaming service I didn't recognize, registered under my granddaughter's name? And why, when I asked about these things, did they always say the same thing? "It's no big deal, Mom. You must have clicked something. You don't need to worry about that anymore." That last one. That was the phrase that finally pushed me over. You don't need to worry about that anymore. What does a person have left when they're not allowed to worry about their own life? I circled it in the notebook. I wrote it twice, 3 times. Then I closed the book and looked out the window at the swing in the backyard, the one my son used to run to after school, his backpack bouncing behind him. He hasn't sat on that swing in decades, but I have. On days when the house felt like a stranger, when I needed to be reminded of something rooted, something that stayed. I sat on it again that morning just as the sky was starting to lighten. The air was cool, soft. I held the notebook on my lap and breathed in the quiet. I knew then that the next part wouldn't be about waiting anymore. It would be about finding the answers. Finding the documents. Finding the truth they'd kept just far enough from me. And once I found it, I wouldn't be asking their permission to worry. I'd be showing them exactly why I had every right to. I started with the drawer beside the bed, not because I thought that's where the answers were. I knew better than that, but because that's where the habit lived. Old habits of sorting, of saving, of making order out of the daily scraps a life collects. Expired insurance cards, church newsletters, warranties for appliances, long gone. A ring box from before the divorce. single glove I could never bring myself to throw away. I cleared the drawer slowly, layering things across the quilt like clues to a life. Someone forgot to finish writing. Then I moved to the file cabinet in the hallway. I used to keep everything in tidy folders labeled in blue ink. Mortgage, medical, utilities, family stuff. Over the years, things had been moved, not stolen. That would have been easier to name. No, this was something trickier. A slow shifting. Replaced documents. Some missing. Some with newer dates and handwriting that wasn't mine. I found a bank statement dated 6 months prior, with my name at the top and her email address listed as the contact. The email wasn't one I'd ever used. I looked at it for a long... Well, she had changed one letter in my name, probably just enough to register the account as hers without raising flags. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat still. Then I wrote it down in the notebook. Page after page began filling with these small shifts. Doctor appointment summary sent to them. My pension deposit redirected through an account I no longer recognized. Utility bill that now auto-paid from my savings. The one hadn't touched since my 60th birthday. They always said I had nothing to worry about. They'd taken care of everything. But that's the thing about control. When someone insists you don't need it, it's usually because they already do. One morning, I drove to the bank branch downtown. The old one with the ivy growing along the brick side and the bell above the glass door that jingled faintly when I stepped in. The woman at the counter remembered me. She looked up and smiled softly, said she hadn't seen me in a while. I told her I needed to speak to someone privately. My voice wasn't shaky. It was low and firm, the kind of voice that rises only when it has carried silence for too long. They gave me a room in the back, quiet, cold. I pulled out my notebook and opened it to the page with the altered email. Then I unfolded the bank statement. Then another. The man across from me, young, polite, too careful with his words, glanced at the documents and frowned. He said he would need to speak to a supervisor. When they came back, they asked if I was sure these weren't changes I had authorized. I told them I hadn't. They asked if I was feeling overwhelmed, if I had someone assisting me. I said I had a son. Then I waited. I watched their faces change. Eventually, after a pause that stretched too long, they confirmed what I already knew. My accounts had been consolidated and not by me. New contact info. A restructured online profile, automatic permissions given. To someone listed as a trusted user, I asked who added her. They said her name and my stomach went tight. They offered me a chair. I was already sitting. That afternoon, I went home and took every piece of mail I had and sorted it on the floor. Like I used to sort coupons. I highlighted names, dates, cross-referenced every account with the logins I remembered. Every time I found something that didn't match, I wrote it in the notebook. They called me that evening. My daughter-in-law first, then my son. Both numbers I ignored. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. I wasn't ready to ask the questions. Not until I had every answer laid bare. The next morning, I visited the courthouse. It took hours, slow lines, metal detectors, tired faces, but I waited. I spoke to a clerk who pointed me toward the public records desk. There, I found something I didn't expect. A document filed in my name 2 years ago. Durable power of attorney, signed and notarized. I remembered none of it, and yet my signature was there, slanted and small, the kind I used only when I was rushed or pressured. I took a copy home that night. I sat on the porch swing, holding the document in one hand and a cup of tea in the other. I rocked slowly as the sky dimmed. The neighbor's wind chimes played a tune I used to hum while folding laundry. And I thought about how long it takes for people to stop seeing you as someone who decides. Somewhere along the way, they'd started seeing me as a problem to manage, a branch to prune, not a person, not a woman who'd raised a boy from bruised knees to wedding vows. Just a name on an account, a house full of things to be sorted, a set of digits to be moved. But I was still here, still thinking, still learning. I made another call that week, this time to the lawyer I'd met at the library, the one Louise had told me about. We sat together in his quiet office, surrounded by filing cabinets and a ticking clock. He looked over the power of attorney document. He studied my notes. He listened, really listened. Then he looked at me, not with pity, not with disbelief, and said softly that what they'd done might not be illegal, but it wasn't right. I nodded. He told me we could take steps. Quiet ones, smart ones. He asked if I was ready. I said yes, not because I wanted a fight, but because I wanted my name back. There's a particular silence that settles in after truth is confirmed, not the silence of grief, but the kind that lives beneath it, the silence of knowing, of no longer pretending not to see. I sat with that silence for days. I stopped answering their calls. I needed space between their voices and my own thoughts, space to hear myself again. It's easy to forget what your own mind sounds like after years of being gently corrected, softly redirected, and told you're imagining things, all in the name of love. My lawyer, Michael, was methodical. He didn't rush me. He didn't speak in legalese. He told me I wasn't the first woman to walk into his office with a story like mine, and I wouldn't be the last. He said betrayal by family is often the quietest crime because it hides. Behind Sunday dinners and birthday cards and just trying to help, we started with the basics. I revoked the power of attorney quietly. Legally, he drafted a new document with someone I trusted, Helen, my friend from church. She's strong, clear-eyed, and a retired nurse. She's seen enough people disappear inside systems to know how to stand her ground. When I asked her, her eyes didn't widen. She just nodded. Said she'd be honored. Then we moved to the accounts. I opened new ones, just in my name. No shared access. We updated beneficiaries, changed passwords, closed loopholes. Oh, there were so many. Each one like a crack in a wall I thought was solid. Michael helped me write a letter to the bank explaining the unauthorized changes. We didn't accuse not, yet we just drew a line, a legal line. I sent it registered mail, signature required. I imagined their faces when they opened it. I imagined the moment my daughter-in-law realized I wasn't asleep anymore. The hardest part was going through the will. I had drafted the original version years ago, back when my son still called me for advice on how to season a roast, and before his wife started using words like restructure and estate value. Back when I believed they would do right by me. But things had changed. They had changed. The new version was cleaner, simpler. I left a letter with it, not dramatic, not angry, just honest. I explained why I made the changes. I told them I loved them. I told them I remembered everything, not in bitterness, but in clarity. And then I wrote one last thing. You told me I didn't need to worry, that you had it all handled. And now I do too. That was the line that made me pause. That was the moment I felt something return, not power, exactly. Something quieter, dignity, maybe even peace, after the paperwork. I started looking around the house with different eyes. The furniture looked heavier, the corners more still. I began to wonder what it might feel like to leave, not in a rushed way, not in escape, but in choice. I didn't tell anyone, not even Helen. I just started a little folder labeled Next Chapter. I clipped a map from a magazine, circled a few coastal towns I'd always wanted to visit. I printed out RV listings. I looked into long-term rentals in places with salt, air, and silence. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew it was mine. In the evenings, I would sit by the window with a cup of tea and think about my mother's hands. She used to sew, not for work, just for calm. I remember watching her fingers move over the fabric, steady and patient, like they trusted time to do its work. She used to say that stitching something back together was never about making it like new, was about making it stronger in the place it tore. That's what I was doing, I think. Stitching myself back together in the quiet, I started saying no. More often, no to helping with school pickup. Shh, No to last-minute errands. No to pretending I didn't notice the way they spoke to me like I was fading. One morning, I received a call from the pharmacy. My refill had been denied insurance issue. When I asked which policy was on file, the woman said a name I didn't recognize. I asked her to check the date of the last update. It was changed by authorized contact 3 months earlier. I hung up calmly, called Michael, sent over the details. By the end of the week, that was sorted too. Another cord cut, another lock changed. I could feel it happening, little by little, the unbraiding of their grip. It didn't come with shouts or slam doors. It came in small acts of remembering I was still the one who knew where everything was. The one who still had the keys. Then came the text from my son, just checking in. Hope you're well. No mention of the bank letters. No mention of the revoked power of attorney. No mention of the frozen accounts. Just that thin, brittle line. Hope you're well. I stared at it for a long time. I typed a response, then erased it. Typed again. Erased again. Finally, I wrote, I'm doing well, thank you. You don't need to worry about me, and I meant it. Not as a jab. Not as revenge, but as truth. Because I had worried for too long. About what they thought, about what they might do. About how to stay useful in a world that had already moved on from needing me. Now they could worry. If they chose to, and I could finally rest, not in helplessness, but in ownership. The porch light flickered on that evening while I watered the plants. The air smelled like basil and dusk. I watched the light fall across the mailbox, the garden. Hose, the cracked stepping stone with my granddaughter's footprint pressed into it. There was no dramatic music. No sudden clap of thunder. Just a woman standing in her yard realizing she hadn't lost herself. She'd just been placed in the wrong story, and now she was writing her way out of it. It happened over tea. Not the confrontation itself that came later, but the moment I knew I would do it, was sitting at the table with a mug in both hands, watching steam rise into the late morning sun. The house was still, I hadn't turned on the radio, hadn't opened the windows. It's just me in the chair creaking beneath me as I rocked gently back and forth. It's the way I used to when he was a baby, and sleep came only if I moved. I had been preparing for weeks. Gathering, copying, notarizing, locking documents in a safe my son didn't know about. I wasn't scared anymore. The fear had thinned into something cleaner resolve. They'd built a story around me. One with careful language and smiling edges. They told others I was forgetful, that I was slowing down, that they were stepping in early just in case. That phrase again, just in case. I used to hear it and nod. Now I heard it and saw a shovel. They didn't know how much I knew. That was the one gift silence gave me. It bought time. It's time to watch them. It's time to learn how the story was being told without my voice in it. It's time to reclaim mine. The day came on a Wednesday. He called first, asked if I was free to have lunch, just him, no one else. He said it casually, like we hadn't already crossed some unspoken line. I said yes. I wore my gray sweater, the one he'd given me for Christmas 5 years ago, back when gifts were still thoughtful and not just obligatory. I pinned my hair back, slipped the updated will and revoked documents into my bag. Not because I planned to show them that day, but because I wanted them close. We met at a cafe halfway between our houses. It's the kind with too many hanging plants and mismatched mugs. He was already seated when I arrived, scrolling on his phone. Stood when he saw me, smiled, kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. We talked at first about little things. The weather, a neighbor's recent move, how his daughter was adjusting to her new school. I asked questions. He answered, mostly. But there was a layer of tension under his voice, like he was waiting for something. Then he leaned forward. Careful, he said. He knew things had felt strained lately, but maybe we'd misunderstood each other. That his wife was just trying to help. That I didn't always make it easy to be helped. I looked at him, really looked. The lines near his eyes, the faint shadow of stubble, the way he still cracked his knuckles the way he used to before piano recitals. I told him I didn't need help. I needed honesty. He went quiet. Then he laughed a little, gently, and said maybe I was being too sensitive. That I'd misread things, that I'd imagined betrayals where there were only good intentions. There it was, the dismissal, the soft erasure, the words designed not to sting, but to blur. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't lean in. I just said calmly that I had copies, emails, paperwork, signatures I hadn't made, transactions I hadn't authorized, conversations I remembered perfectly. He blinked, tilted his head, said I must be mistaken. I told him I wasn't. He looked around then as if to see if anyone was listening, then back at me, said they had only done what they thought was best. That managing my accounts was easier this way, that I'd never complained before, that I'd seemed overwhelmed. I stirred my tea slowly, watched the swirl of milk cloud the surface. I asked him if he remembered the way I used to handle the house budget when he was growing up, the way I could stretch a single paycheck into groceries, school shoes, and birthday party favors with enough left over for a Sunday roast. He said yes. I asked if I'd ever once missed a mortgage payment, or forgotten to pay the light bill, or bounced a check. He said no. Then I said softly that I hadn't suddenly become helpless. I hadn't lost the ability to choose. I had only lost the space to speak, because they'd been speaking for me. He said that wasn't fair. I said neither was changing my will without telling me, or locking me out of my accounts, or moving my name on the insurance policies beneath his wife's. The silence stretched. He picked up his coffee but didn't drink it. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "We were just trying to secure your future." And I replied, "I am still my future." He looked at me then, finally, not like a child looking at a parent, or a manager looking at a liability, but like a man who had underestimated the woman in front of him. I stood up, took my bag, told him I had already filed the changes, that everything was now in order, legally, that I had chosen someone else to represent me and it was already notarized, that my home, my will, my accounts, all of it, were mine again. He didn't follow me out. He didn't call after me. He just sat there, blinking. The drive home was quiet. Didn't play the radio. Didn't cry. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the leaves shiver in the wind. Then I walked inside and exhaled. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. And there's something holy in that. Not loud, not cinematic. It's just honest. Like returning to your own name after someone else has spoken it wrong for too long, after the cafe. The air around me changed. It wasn't visible. Was no sudden shift in the sky, no dramatic gust of wind, but I felt it in my bones. In the stillness of the house when I walked back through the front door and set my bag down beside the umbrella stand, something had turned. And I could feel myself returning not to the woman I used to be, but to someone steadier, clearer. Someone with both hands on the wheel. I didn't tell many people what had happened. I've learned that not everyone wants the truth, especially when it doesn't come wrapped in a happy ending. But I told the right people. Helen was the first. She came over that Sunday with a Tupperware dish of baked ziti and her usual gentle way of asking if I was eating. Enough. I waited until we'd eaten half of it, until our hands were cradling warm mugs and the silence between us felt safe. Then I told her everything. She didn't gasp, didn't clutch her chest or shake her head. She just set her cup down slowly and said, "Good, I'm glad you're telling me now." That sentence loosened something in me. Not because it was surprising, Helen's always been steady, but because it reminded me that the world outside my family still existed. That love, real love, didn't arrive in management or disguise itself in silence. She asked if I needed help with anything. Told her I didn't need help. Kai needed partnership. So we made a list. That week she drove me to appointments. We met. With a financial advisor, a woman this time, sharp as glass and calm as winter. I liked her immediately. She didn't speak down to me. She asked about my long-term plans, like they mattered. Like I had time and choice and dignity. Which I do. We reviewed every policy. Every account. We talked about retirement in a new way. Not as something shrinking, but something shifting. She even suggested a few investments that felt safe and reasonable. She said, "You've got more life ahead than you think." I hadn't realized how hungry I was to hear someone say that afterwards. Helen and I got soft serve ice cream and sat in the car with the windows rolled down, watching teenagers skateboard in the parking lot. I told her I hadn't had ice cream in months. She said that was a sin. I laughed for the first time in a long while. Really laughed. It felt like cracking a window in a room that had grown stale. The next name on the list was Mrs. McCrae, my old neighbor, 2 streets over. She used to watch my son when he was little, back when I was picking up night shifts and barely sleeping. We hadn't spoken much in recent years, just exchanged polite waves across parking lots and the occasional birthday card. But when I called her, her voice lifted. She came over with a photo album under her arm. We sat on the floor flipping through images her late husband's garden, our boys in Halloween costumes, all those birthdays with sheet cakes and folding chairs. She looked at me and said, "You still have your spark. Don't let them bury it before you're ready." That sentence stayed with me. I wrote it in my notebook, underlined it twice. I began to clear things out of the house, not in haste, not in anger, but with intention. The closets, the attic, the bottom drawers filled with linens I hadn't touched since my knees were stronger. I set things aside for donation, gave others away. Each bag felt like a piece of weight unlatched from my chest. I moved the armchair by the window, the one they said was bad for my back, so it now faced the morning sun. I planted herbs again in the small pots by the porch. Basil, rosemary, thyme. Their scent lifted into the kitchen each time I opened the screen door. A kind of welcome dot one evening, Helen and I took out a map. I pointed to the coast, a little town I'd visited only once in my 20s. She nodded, said, "It's never too late to have a favorite place again." That sentence made me tear up, but I blinked them back. I wasn't falling apart anymore. I was falling into place then. Came the letter Dot. It arrived in a cream envelope with the return address I knew too well, her handwriting on the front, neat and unyielding. Inside a folded page, a single paragraph. She said they were concerned that I seemed to be making sudden decisions, that the family was worried I might be confused, that perhaps a medical consultation might be appropriate, just to ensure everything was still functioning properly. I didn't rage, didn't crumble. I opened the notebook and wrote down her words. Sudden decisions. Family is worried. Medical consultation. Then I wrote my own response in blue pen on clean stationery. I am not confused. I am aware. I am not making sudden decisions. I am finally making my own. You are not concerned. You are cornered. Kindly do not write again. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. Writing it was enough. The days became clearer after that. I scheduled an appointment with a notary to finalize the changes to my property. I called the county assessor's office. I confirmed everything in my name. I began looking at RV listings seriously now. Not as fantasy, but as future. One morning, sitting on the porch, felt the wind move through the chimes and thought, this isn't the end of something. It's the beginning, not a new chapter. A new book. One I'd author alone, on my own terms. It wasn't a courtroom or a kitchen table or even a screaming match on a doorstep. That's not how I wanted it. It's not how I live. It happened in an office, beige walls, filtered light, the faint scent of paper and printer ink. A place where people sign things and truths don't need to shout to be believed. Michael had scheduled the meeting. He said it was better this way, with witnesses, with clarity. He was right. I was done having conversations behind closed doors with people who changed the story later. They arrived 10 minutes late. My son in a blazer that didn't quite fit him anymore. My daughter-in-law in her tailored confidence, her lipstick like armor. She didn't look at me at first. Just shook hands with Michael, nodded once at the notary, then sat with the kind of posture that expects to be listened to. I didn't say anything right away. Michael spoke first. Calm, precise, professional. He laid out the agenda like it was any other file. He explained that today's meeting was to confirm legal changes and ensure full transparency. He said full transparency twice. I think he knew how much I needed that thought. Then he passed around the folder, the updated power of attorney, my new will, proof of unauthorized changes to my accounts, email logs, signature discrepancies. It's a photocopy of the document they had filed behind my back. My daughter-in-law didn't blink. She simply crossed her legs, tapped her pen on the table once, and said softly, "This seems like a lot of confusion." I finally looked up. I said, "There's no confusion." I said it once, slowly, and let it hang there. My son looked at me as if he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. His lips parted, then closed again. I think he realized in that moment that there would be no explaining it away, no calling it a misunderstanding. I reached into my bag and took out the notebook. I opened it to the page where I had copied the charge from the hotel, the one that started all of this. The room booked under my name, paid for with my account. During a trip I didn't even know they were on. I slid it across the table. Then I turned the page. Line by line, I read entries aloud. The day the prescription was changed, the bank access transferred, the email updated, the insurance contact swapped, my name slowly being moved to the second row in my own life. She said they had been helping me. I said, "You never asked me if I needed help." She said they thought I was starting to struggle. I said, "You didn't see struggle. You saw opportunity." She shifted then, smoothed her dress, said that I was blowing things out of proportion, that everyone forgets things now and then, that it was normal, that she'd only ever tried to protect me from the burdens of aging. I looked her in the eye. I am not a burden. I am not a balance sheet, and I am not yours to manage. Michael leaned forward gently and clarified that everything had been reversed, legally, that I now had full control of my assets, my health directives, my estate, that if any further attempts were made to access my accounts, it would be treated as financial abuse and pursued accordingly. The notary wrote down every word. My son's face had gone pale. He asked if we could speak privately, just the two of us. I said no, if you couldn't protect me with her in the room. If you won't protect me now without her. He looked down then. I saw the boy I once held for just a moment in the slope of his shoulders. I almost reached for him. Almost, but I didn't, because love without boundaries is not love. Submission. They left before the meeting was over. My daughter-in-law said something under her breath, something sharp and bitter, but I didn't catch it. I didn't need to. I had caught everything else. Michael placed a hand on my arm afterward. Just a brief touch. No words. He knew I didn't need comfort. I needed witness. That night, I lit a candle by the window and watched the flame flicker against the glass. The world was quiet. My phone didn't ring. No apologies arrived. But I didn't expect them to. Justice, I've learned, doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with paper, with stamps, with signatures, with silence. And with that silence, a kind of freedom. I made a list before bed. Change the locks. Get the mail redirected permanently. List the house for quiet sale. No signs, no open houses. Find the RV that's been sitting on my fridge magnet for years. I slept deeply that night. No noise in my head. No voices justifying things I never agreed to. No dreams where I was vanishing from the edges of my own story. Just breath. Mine, in and out. A few days later, got a letter from their lawyer. A polite inquiry about whether I was of sound mind when I signed the new documents. I passed it to Michael. He handled it with the flat expression of someone who's seen it all before. But still, stung. Not because I doubted myself, but because even now, even after all this, they still couldn't imagine a world where I made decisions without their permission. They still couldn't believe I'd done it all awake. I made a cup of tea that afternoon and poured it slowly. Then I walked out to the porch, sat in the swing, and drank it down to the last drop. No sugar. No cream. Just strong, hot, and mine. The last thing I packed was the teapot. It wasn't valuable. A chipped ceramic thing with a hairline cracked down the spout, made lopsided in a community center pottery class. But it was mine. I'd stirred too many quiet mornings into that pot, watched the steam curl like breath into cold rooms. It felt like a kind of companion, one that never asked me to be anything but awake and present. I wrapped it in a kitchen towel and set it gently into the box marked Keep. Then I closed the lid, taped it shut, and stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by soft echoes and cardboard edges. The house had already begun to empty. I'd sold the heavier furniture first, the things they used to comment on. The china cabinet my daughter-in-law once called outdated but sweet. The tall lamp he said I should move so no one tripped. I sold them all to strangers who paid in. Cash in, left politely. No sentiment exchanged. The rest I gave away. To neighbors, to the church, to a young woman starting over. She came by in a rusted blue sedan, soft-spoken, with a toddler balanced on her hip. She took the rocking chair from the guest room and cried as she tied it to her roof. I gave her a quilt, too, said it was stitched with steadier hands than mine. She hugged me tightly and laughed. It felt right, giving away things that had once held my life. Not because I no longer valued them, but because I no longer needed them to prove I had lived. The for sale sign never went up. Michael found me a private buyer, a couple from a nearby town, looking to downsize from a farm. They walked through the house with reverent steps, touching the walls like they already belonged to them. They didn't ask about square footage or water heaters. They asked about the trees, about the light in the morning, about the swing in the backyard. I liked them immediately. I accepted their offer 2 days later. No counter. No hesitation. Because I wasn't selling the house. I was releasing it. I stood on the porch that last evening with a cup of tea, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. I'd watched so many sunsets from that spot. Some while rocking a baby, some while waiting for headlights, some while holding grief like a blanket around my shoulders, and some like now while holding nothing at all. Just breath, just stillness. I didn't tell them I'd sold it, not because I wanted to hurt them. That part of me had quieted. But because they no longer had the right to know my movements. They gave that up when they wrote me out of my own decisions. When they folded my name under theirs on documents I never saw. When they confused my silence for consent, I wasn't. Hiding, I was choosing. Helen came the next morning to help me load the last boxes into the back of the RV. It wasn't new, but it ran well. A soft blue stripe down the side. A table that turned into a bed. Cabinets that clicked shut with a satisfying finality. I'd named her Margot, after my grandmother, the one who once crossed 2 states alone with nothing but a roadmap and a recipe. Box. We laughed as we tried to stuff my winter coat into the overhead bin. I told Helen she could have my fern, the one that never really liked me but survived anyway. She promised to water it, but not too much. Before she left, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Inside was a single sentence. Written in her curling script, "Don't forget, you are allowed to take up space." I hugged her for a long time, then I closed the RV door and turned the key. It felt nothing like leaving. It felt like arriving. The road was quiet. I took the back routes, the slow roads where the trees lean in close and the houses are few and far between. I stopped often. Sometimes just to sit under a tree and eat a sandwich. Sometimes to watch the birds peck at gravel. Sometimes just to breathe where no one knew my name. The silence didn't scare me anymore. I filled it with music, with podcasts, with the occasional voicemail from Helen, who gave updates on the church garden and said my fern was doing better without me. I smiled at that. I started journaling again, not in the old notebook. I left that behind, full and finished. I bought a new one at a roadside gas station with a floral cover and pages that smelled faintly of glue. I wrote about the light through the windshield, about a dog I met at a campsite who wouldn't stop wagging his tail, about a waitress in a diner who gave me a slice of pie for free and said she liked my earrings. I wrote about the absence of fear and about how good it felt to wake up not being expected by anyone. One morning, I parked near the ocean. I found a campground perched on a cliff, the waves just below, slamming softly into the rocks like they were saying, "I'm still here," over and over. I walked down to the shore with my shoes in one hand and my thermos in the other. The water was cold, sharp, real. I stood ankle deep and closed my eyes. I didn't think of the bank dot or the papers, or her voice calling me confused. I thought of my own name, how it sounded in my mouth when I said it aloud. Now, not bitter, not broken dot hole dot mine dot. I stayed there until the tide inched higher. Then I walked back slowly, my footprints erased behind me. That night, I cooked pasta on the little stove, lit a candle, and watched the flames flicker against the glass. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I needed to be anyone's mother or wife or burden or project or memory. I was just a woman with a name, with a story. With a key she turned herself. Sometimes I wake up before the sun rises, and the stillness is so complete, it feels like the world is holding its breath. In those moments, I lie there, not anxious, not sad, just present, listening to the creaks of the RV, the wind brushing gently against the siding. It's a small ticking sound from the kettle as it cools on the stove. There's no one waiting for me now. No clock I need to match my steps to. No one calling from downstairs. No silent expectations in a too quiet house. And I don't miss it. I thought I would, I really believed I'd ache without the roles I carried for so long: mother, grandmother, caretaker, giver, afterthought. But I don't ache. I breathe easier, because I've finally put all that weight down. I used to think love meant staying, available, staying useful, staying quiet, staying good. But what I know now, what I feel down in my bones, is that love, real love, is mutual. It listens, it asks, doesn't confiscate your choices under the guise of protection. It doesn't sign your name for you and call it care. The further I drive from that house, the clearer everything becomes. They didn't betray me in one sudden blow. It was gradual, a slow tightening of boundaries, a gentle editing of my place in the story. At first it felt like help, then like pity, then like permission being quietly revoked, until one day I woke up and realized I was the guest in a life I'd built from scratch. There's a particular heartbreak in realizing your family sees you more as an asset than a person, they say. They love you, and maybe they believe it. But their love is tied to conditions, to control, to comfort that comes at your expense. And once you stop performing, once you stop handing over your dignity in pieces, they don't know where to place you anymore. I used to chase their approval, try to stay easy, non-intrusive, helpful, invisible. I could manage it, but I'm done shrinking. I think the shift began when I heard my own voice again, not in a confrontation, not even in a lawyer's office. It was in the small choices, the ones I made with no one watching: choosing which mug to keep, choosing to stop explaining myself, choosing not to call back, choosing silence over defense, choosing peace over approval. Now I speak less, but when I do, I mean every word. That's the gift of reclamation. Your words don't need to be many. When they're rooted, there's a little spot by the sea I've started returning to. A bench tucked behind a dune where the breeze carries the scent of salt and wild fennel. I bring a thermos, my journal, and sometimes a book. Most days I don't even open it. I just watch the water curl in and out, like the tide is breathing with me. That's where I go to remember. I remember the good things: my son as a toddler, soft curls and open-mouthed laughter. The way he used to draw pictures of us holding hands with the sun overhead. I let myself feel that love, the pure kind, before the world taught him power was something you take. I remember my own mother, stubborn, proud, never needing anyone's permission to change the curtains or speak her mind. I used to roll my eyes at her. Now I understand her pauses, her long silences when the family talked over her. She wasn't retreating. She was gathering. I remember the woman I used to be, running errands, carrying groceries, filling every inch of her day with usefulness. I want to hold her and tell her she didn't have to earn her place. That love was never meant to be a ledger. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever call again, not with concern masked as control, but with humility. With real words. If they do, I'll listen. But I won't return. I can love from here, from the distance I've chosen, the life I've built, the key that only fits my own door. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge, not proving them wrong. It's just remembering myself. Back into the room. I know now that I am not the sum of what I gave. I am not the extra seat at their table. I am not the backup plan when they run low on childcare or sympathy. I am not a signature on a check or a house waiting to be inherited. I am a full person, with agency, with value, with memory sharp enough to cut through the soft fog they tried to wrap me in, and I am still here. I'm here in every mile I drive, in every mug of tea I sip without being watched, in every morning I wake without waiting for their permission to begin. I'm here in the stories I write now. Quiet stories, strong stories. Mine. I've learned that there is more freedom in solitude than in company that doubts you. That silence can be sacred, not punishment, but peace. That starting over at 70 is not a failure. It's a return. To yourself, to your name, to the sound of your own voice in a room no one else controls. It started with a postcard. I found it in a basket outside a thrift shop. It's tucked between an old cookbook and a cracked snow globe. The postcard was yellowed. At the edges, the ink faded but still legible. On the front, a watercolor of a lighthouse. On the back, someone had written, "You'd love it here." The sea sounds like it's speaking in its sleep. I held it for a long time. I didn't know the sender or the recipient. But that sentence, it felt like it was written for me. Like it had waited in that basket until I was ready to find it. I bought it for 25 cents and pinned it above my bed in the RV. That was the first thing I claimed, not just as mine, but as a beginning. I started collecting again, not things, not furniture or heirlooms, but pieces of beauty found. Objects, small, forgotten details. A smooth stone from the river bend. A torn scrap of poetry from a free library box. Pressed leaf from a trail I couldn't finish but still walked halfway. They didn't serve a purpose. They weren't useful. They were simply beautiful. That was enough. One morning, parked in a quiet lot outside a diner shaped like a train car, I opened my journal and drew the lighthouse from the postcard. I'm not an artist, at least not in the way people use the word, but my hand knew how to follow memory. The soft lines, the tilt of the roof, the tiny window with a hint of light. It wasn't perfect, but it felt real. That's when the idea came, not a big one, just a flicker. A thought that maybe I could make something, not for anyone else, not to prove anything. It's to see what might happen if I created instead of erased. I bought a box of art supplies at a garage sale for $12, pastels, watercolor pans, graphite pencils with worn erasers. I cleared a corner of the RV's little table and gave it a name, my window space, and every morning, before I made tea, before I read the news, before I worried whether anyone had called or not, I sat down and drew something. A seashell, the handle of my mug, the way the curtain folded in the breeze, my own hand holding a pencil. I didn't post it anywhere, didn't share it. That felt important. This was between me and the hours that used to be, filled with waiting for them. Sometimes I wrote instead. Not long essays or letters, just phrases. Lines that came to me while I watched the sky change. I am not an afterthought. I am a beginning. They edited me out. I rewrote the page. No one can take from me what I decide is sacred. I'd tape these on the wall next to the postcard. A little gallery of reminders. Not of who they made me, but of who I remembered being before they named me helpless. The truth is, it took so much without asking. Not just money or signatures, not just decisions. They took time, they took presence. It took the sense that I was allowed to want something more than being useful to them. But they didn't take my imagination, and that's where my real voice was hiding all along. In color. In line. In light on paper, a few weeks later, I parked the RV near a lake town where vendors set up tables every Saturday morning. I didn't plan to stop. I was just going to pass through, buy some peaches, maybe stretch my legs. But there was a woman selling blank cards made from her watercolor prints. She had painted trees in the rain and birds mid-flight, and simple things like pears on a windowsill. I asked her about them. She smiled and said she just painted what she saw. That it helped her feel real again. I knew exactly what she meant. I asked if she ever took other people's work on consignment. She said she did. I went back to the RV, thumbed through my sketches, and found 5 I could let go of. Not because they were the best, but because they were honest. I brought them back in a manila envelope, heart pounding in my chest like I was 17 again and sharing a secret. She flipped through them quietly. Then she said, "These feel like someone telling the truth." I left them with her. Didn't even ask for payment. Just wanted to know what it felt like to have something I made rest in someone else's hands, not as proof of my usefulness, but as a piece of me that survived. That night, I slept with the window cracked and the sketchbook open on the table. I dreamed of lighthouses and postcards and water that never stopped speaking. And when I woke up for the first time in years, I felt not just alive, but part of the world again. Not watching from behind glass. Not sitting politely at the edge of the frame. In it, the one drawing the lines. I didn't plan to stay long in the town with the painted cards, but days stretched easily there, and I didn't feel the need to move. Not out of fear, not out of routine. I simply liked the way the air smelled, pine and rain and wood smoke. The way strangers said hello without peering too closely. The way the lake looked different every hour, as if it were remembering how to be new. I parked the RV at the edge of a small campground just past the marina. Quiet, shaded. One other camper, a man in his 70s with a beard like an old tree and a laugh that came from somewhere deep in the ribs. His name was James. He fished in the morning and carved driftwood in the afternoon. He wore the same pair of boots every day and called his radio her. We spoke in fragments at first. Morning. Fish biting. Not yet. He didn't ask questions. That's what I liked about him. He didn't try to solve me. He didn't assume I was lost. He just made a second cup of coffee in the mornings and left it on the picnic table between our campers. I drank it warm, not hot. It's just how I liked it. He noticed. One afternoon, I watched him carve a bird from a twisted piece of wood. I asked if he sold them. He shook his head and said, "Some things aren't made for price tags." Then he handed it to me and said, "This one's for your dashboard. Do you remember you're flying now?" I didn't cry, but I did run my thumb along the grain and feel something loosen behind my ribs. The woman from the card table, her name was Beth, called me later that week. She said 2 of my prints had sold. She asked if I had more. Told her I did. Not many, but enough. She invited me to set up a corner of her table the next Saturday. It's just a few pieces, no pressure. She even said I could sit if I wanted. Not to sell, just to be there. I almost said no. My first instinct still was to stay small. But then I thought of the postcard. It's the one that started all of this. The way it had waited for me like a door just slightly ajar. So I said yes. I spent the next 2 days sketching quietly at the lake's edge, layering light onto paper, listening to my own breath as it settled into something steady. I didn't care who liked them, only cared that they felt honest. That Saturday, I wore my blue linen shirt. It's the one I used to save for holidays. I pinned my name to a small card in front of my stack, just my first name. That felt like enough people stopped. Not many, but enough. They asked where I'd learned to draw. I told them I hadn't. I'd just started noticing things. One woman picked up a print of a chipped mug and said it reminded her of her grandmother. A teenager asked if I sold bookmarks. The man with a leather satchel bought 3 note cards and told me he sent letters to his mother every Sunday. Even though she never wrote back, Every word settled inside me like a new brick laid gently into store. Place. This, I realized, was connection. Not forced, not guilt-laced, not taken from me without asking. Just people seeing something I made and recognizing something of themselves inside it. After the market, Beth and I sat on the curb with paper cups of lemonade. She asked if I'd always been on the road. I told her no, that I used to have a house and a family and a name that people used like a signature on things they didn't want to carry themselves. She didn't pry. She just nodded. Then she said something I'll never forget. You don't look like someone running away. You look like someone returning. And I realized that's exactly what this has been. Not an escape, a return to my own eyes, to my own voice, to the quiet rhythm of a life that belongs to no one else but me. Later that night, sat by the campfire with James and watched the logs collapse in on themselves, glowing from the inside out. He handed me a tin of roasted peanuts. We didn't speak for a while. Just listened to the night. Then he asked, not urgently, just curiously, what made you leave? I didn't tell the whole story. I didn't need to. I just said they told me I was paranoid. So I checked the bank. They were flying on my name. He nodded once, said as if that explained everything. Which, in a way, it did. I told him. I froze their cards. He smiled. I didn't tell him the rest. That it wasn't about the money. That it was about being slowly disappeared. That it was about waking up in your own life and realizing someone else had already written the ending for you, but maybe he already knew. We sat until the fire died down. Then he stood and said, you ever carved anything? Said no. He said you should. You've already started. The envelope was plain. It's no return address. It's just my name in sharp, confident ink. The kind that tries to control a conversation before it begins. I found it resting on the picnic table beside the RV one morning. The dew hadn't soaked through the paper yet, which meant someone had left it early. Too early to knock, too early to say it face -to -face . My stomach didn't twist. My hands didn't shake. I sat with it for a moment, breathing in the quiet. Birds hopping near the fire pit. The lake still like glass. My coffee cooling beside me. Then I opened it. It wasn't long. Just 3 paragraphs. Typed, centered on the page like something meant to feel formal, important. But I could already hear her voice in the spaces between the lines. My daughter-in-law, she said she hoped I was safe and well. She said they were concerned about the decisions I'd been making. She said they understood I was processing a lot of change. She said they still cared. Then, in the final line, if you're open to it, we'd like to sit down and talk. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they did. Just that empty word, concern. Just that familiar invitation to return to the same quiet erasure, dressed up now in concern and civility. I folded the letter back into its envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't keep it either. I placed it under a stone near the fire pit. Let the wind take its time. Then I took out my notebook and wrote, not to them, but to myself. This is not my door to open. I closed it gently. I did not slam it. But I closed it for good. I think they still believe I left in a burst of emotion, that I was fragile, impulsive, confused. They don't understand that what I did was measured, researched, documented, filed, witnessed. That I didn't leave the house in the middle of the night. I walked out in daylight with the deed in my name and my dignity intact. I didn't need to scream. I needed to disappear from their version of me. Sometimes I wonder if my son even read the new will, or if she read it for him, told him not to worry, told him I'd come around, that it was just a phase. That old age makes women dramatic, but I'm not old in the way they thought I was. Not fading, not foggy. I'm vivid, vivid enough to know that reconciliation without responsibility isn't peace. It's permission to be erased again. So I didn't write back. Instead, I mailed something else, not to them, to my granddaughter. A card, handwritten, soft paper. A small sketch of a robin on the front, the kind that visits me every morning near the cedar tree. Inside, I wrote, I hope you're well. I think of you often. I don't know what you've been told, but one day, if you want to hear the truth from my voice, you'll know where to find me. I didn't include a return address, just an email, one I check when I feel strong enough. It's one that doesn't live in a shared house or on a shared account. I sealed it, sent it, let it go. It wasn't about reuniting. It was about leaving a light on. It's just in case she ever wanders. Far enough to want warmth that doesn't come with conditions. James asked me later that day if I was okay. He didn't press, just noticed the way my hands were quieter than usual. I told him the truth. I said, they reached out. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask what they said. He just nodded and asked, and did you reach back? I shook my head. I've already arrived, I said, and I meant it. That night, I walked down to the lake and watched the stars blink into the surface. The air was cooler than it had been in weeks. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, one I found at a second-hand shop in the last town. Soft gray, smelled like lavender and old books. I thought about all the rooms I used to walk into, trying not to be too much, trying to blend, to behave, to earn a seat by being small. Now I walk into rooms like air, present, steady. It's unseen only by those not paying attention. And I don't bend anymore. I build. I draw. I carve, I sketch lighthouses. And women sitting alone on swings. I paint windows cracked open to summer air. I write my name in the corner of every page because this chapter, this one right here, is mine. No one gets to revise it for comfort. No one gets to redact the pages they didn't like. No one gets to title it confused, ungrateful, or overreacting. I know exactly what I saw. I know exactly what they did. And I know exactly what I saved myself, not the woman they remember. Not the one who handed over her accounts with a trusting smile. Not the one who folded into a couch corner so others could stretch out, and sprawl. But the woman who quietly left and chose herself. I don't know exactly where I'm going next. There's a map pinned to the inside of the cupboard above the stove, folded, creased, a few towns circled in pencil. I look at it some mornings over tea, trace the routes with my finger, wondering which road will feel right when I reach it. But I don't rush anymore. I let the days tell me what they want, and I follow. Sometimes I park beside the sea. Sometimes it's a meadow full of nothing but wind and bees. Sometimes a grocery lot with the lights buzzing overhead. None of it feels like less than home, because I carry home now. Not on my back, not in the RV, but in me. And that's something no one can transfer or co-sign or quietly reassign behind my back. This life, this breath is mine. I keep a new journal now, not a ledger, not a record of wrongs, just moments. A boy at the gas station who told me my silver hair looked cool. A librarian who asked if I wanted to run a watercolor class for seniors. A girl who bought one of my postcards and said she was going to write herself a letter and keep it sealed until she turned 20. Little things, nothing urgent, nothing headline-worthy, but they're mine. And isn't that what I was fighting for? All along. Not noise, not revenge. Just the right to exist in full. To be seen, without being used. The thing no one tells you about reclaiming your life is that the world doesn't stop to applaud you when you do. There's no music swelling in the background. No speech. No moment of dramatic closure. There's just you, quiet, steady, still standing, and the next small choice that belongs to you. I wake up each morning and make mine warm the kettle. Open the blinds, stretch, paint something small, choose kindness. Toward myself first, then the world. I used to worry they'd call again, that they'd try one more time to fold me back into their version of things. The tidy story where I was always the one losing touch. Being fragile, needing management. But they haven't, and I think I'm finally okay with that, because I don't want them to see me as a cautionary tale. I want them, if they ever think of me, to feel the weight of what they underestimated. The cost of quiet betrayal, and maybe years from now, When my granddaughter finds that letter buried in an old drawer, she'll come looking. Not out of obligation, but out of hunger for something real. I'll be ready. If she does, I'll tell her everything, if she asks. And nothing, if she just wants to sit beside me in silence. Some truths don't need words. Some healing happens. In the way we pour each other tea the other day. I drove through a stretch of open land that looked like nothing from a distance. But I stopped anyway, walked a little. And there it was, a single swing tied to a cottonwood tree, swaying gently in the breeze, no house nearby. No sign, just the swing. I sat in it for a long time. I didn't think about the house I left, or the cards I froze, or the conversations that never reached the kind of truth they pretended to seek. I thought about the strength it takes to sit still in a life you built with your own hands, not one assigned to you, not one inherited, a life you chose after all the choices had been taken from you. I don't need closure from them. I have something better. A day that begins with my name, spoken only by me. A sky that has no ceiling. A road that keeps going. And the ability to stop, really stop, without asking permission. There's a kind of peace that lives at the edge of enough. I've found it here, in chipped mugs, in used sketchbooks, in postcards with no return addresses. In the slow way, a fire burns when you're not rushing it to warm you. I used to want them to understand. Now I just want to keep walking. And if they see me from a distance, strong, steady, unbothered, I hope they know this. They didn't break me. They revealed me. They showed me exactly where my name lived, where it didn't. They handed me the sharpest kind of freedom, the one you don't ask for but claim. And I took it not with rage, not with noise, but with a hand on a door that would never open again. So here I am, a woman on the road, with art supplies in one drawer, lemons in the fridge, a bird carving on the dashboard, a swing in the rearview mirror. And no, wait, that doesn't belong to her anymore. The end. Now, I'm curious about you. Have you ever experienced something like this? Let me know in the comments. And if you stayed with me until now, thank you. I'll leave you with 2 other stories I think you'll love.